Hello, I'm Weijia Jiang in Washington. A federal grand jury has voted to indict former President Trump in the January 6th investigation. He faces 4 counts in the indictment, including conspiracy to defraud the United States. The former president has been summoned to the courthouse here in Washington on Thursday. There are at least 6 co-conspirators that are not named. Special counsel Jack Smith had this to say about the indictment.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
Why didn't you charge any of the other?
For more on this, Graham Cates and Jessica Levinson join us now. Graham is a CBS News investigative reporter, and Jessica is a CBS News legal contributor. Jessica, I want to start with you. I know that you've probably been leafing through these 45 pages along with the rest of us. What did these counts tell you about the potential evidence that Jack Smith has now collected against Donald Trump?
It tells me that it's strong and that there is a lot of it. So what we see here in the 4 counts is really a methodically laid out indictment that talks about a scheme to defraud the United States, to try and stop the counting of the Electoral College votes, and to try and cheat people essentially out of an honest counting of their vote. I think it's interesting here that the special prosecutor did not decide to go ahead with the insurrection claim, because that can be difficult to prove and there can be some First Amendment issues, some First Amendment defenses there. Instead, I think the way the indictment reads is that the special prosecutor absolutely will rely on the idea that the former president tried to incite an insurrection, but that he's in fact charged crimes that relate to doing that in order to, again, try and invalidate the election, which defrauds the U.S. of their honest votes, defrauds the voters of their honest votes, and defrauds the government of their ability to count the votes and their ability to have a free and fair election. In my mind, there's really kind of 2 parts to the indictment. First, it's that the allegations that the former president lied and that he knew he lied, and then the allegations that the former president took very specific actions to try and overturn the election.
And Graham, this indictment also lays out the special prosecutor's belief that Trump did not act alone. We know that there are at least 6 other co-conspirators, allegedly, but they have yet to be charged. Do we know why not? Do we know who they might be and how they might play a role in Trump's case?
We don't know why they're not charged, but they're described as 4 lawyers for former President Trump, a political consultant, and a DOJ, Justice Department official. And they described this series of events where these alleged co-conspirators get together to push officials to ignore the popular vote and organize fraudulent slates of electors in 7 states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So you get kind of the scope of this. And the indictment lays out meeting by meeting where they talked about ways to get the slates of electors in there, talked about meetings they had with officials in different states, talking, in one case, say, an unindicted co-conspirator says, we don't necessarily have the evidence yet, but we have a lot of theories that we're working on. And this kind of goes on for 2 months leading up to January 6th.
And Jessica, you know, one thing that really stood out to me in Jack Smith's remarks was something that both of you touched on. He said he wanted a speedy trial. Clearly, that means he believes he has the evidence, right, to do that. What does a speedy trial mean, though? How fast are we talking?
Well, I would say you don't bring this case unless you think you have the evidence. I mean, this is going to be the most scrutinized case potentially in our nation's history. And so a speedy trial really can mean that we're not talking about weeks here, but we could potentially be talking about months. And I know there was a previous conversation about the fact that this case, although it's complicated, it actually could be brought much more quickly than the Mar-a-Lago case, because the Mar-a-Lago case deals with those classified documents. And in that case, we have a relatively new judge who's going to have to figure out a number of really complicated issues dealing with who sees that national security information, whether or not it's presented to the jury. There's a lot of big, thorny questions before you get to trial in the Mar-a-Lago case. And while this case is hugely consequential, I think you could potentially see a very motivated prosecutor and judge say, we're going to do this before the election. I mean, that is absolutely physically possible to do. And of course, I think we know that the former president's best defense is really the electoral calendar. It's not something that would be said in court. It's trying to remain out of court until the election.
Regardless of the timeline, it will be unfolding as campaign 2024 really heats up. Graham Cates and Jessica Levinson, thank you for your time.